Welcome to all of you to this event, which will be held in English. But allow me to speak in Spanish, since one of the priorities of the Fundación Ramón Areces is to foster the use of Spanish language in science. Queridos amigos y amigas,
dear friends, authorities, and collaborators of Nobel Prize Outreach, Mrs. Secretary for State for Digitalization and AI, good afternoon. My name is Raimundo Pérez Hernández, and I'm the General Director of the Ramón Areces Foundation, on whose behalf the Scientific Committee and Social Sciences Committee, I welcome you warmly to this event that we organize jointly with Nobel Prize Outreach. And I want to greet Professor Mayor Zaragoza and Professor Gouza, presidents, former and current presidents of the Scientific Council of the Foundation. I would like to thank, first of all the people in the audience who have come to the Foundation today on such a hot day. Thank you very much. As an additional sample of my gratitude, I am pleased to invite you after this session to a glass of Spanish wine, or even two, if you feel like it, which we will serve after this event. Secondly, I would like to thank the dedication of all the team of Nobel Prize Outreach, led by Laura Sprachman and Adam Smith. Today we have had a very, very pleasant lunch with good Spanish red wine and rice pudding and cinnamon for dessert. Thank you for how pleasant it's been to work with you, for your professionalism and sympathy. We knew you when in 2019 we co-organized the first Nobel Prize dialogue, the first one in Europe and outside of Sweden, on the future of aging. We have got a little bit older since then, but not so much. I think it was a milestone, an initial milestone that led to a current of trust and mutual sympathy in our collaboration with the Nobel Prize Outreach organization, which I hope and desire continues over the next few years. As Donoso Cortés, the Spanish philosopher, said, what is important is not only to be together, but to do things together. I would also like to thank the team of the Ramón Areces Foundation, which I know has prepared this event with great care and enthusiasm. Thank you to all of you. This seminar on imagination at work is the colophon of the collaboration program, the program we have with Nobel Prize Outreach in 2022, which is materialized in 11 podcasts called Nobel Prize Conversations, which have brought us closer to the Nobel Prize winners and have illustrated us on the personal and professional trajectory of these Nobel Prize winners. And to transform information in knowledge, we need reflection. We need to reflect, to think. And this is a fascinating process of thought about life, which we're going to see and hear about here today. The study of philosophy shows us that, in very simple terms, there have been two great steps ahead for humanity. The materialistic conception that gave tremendous importance to the tendencies deriving from economic and social forces, and the other trend which considered that the main engine of history was the imagination and determination of some exceptional individuals who have left their seal on history. I think that these dialogues with different Nobel Prize winners contribute to strengthen the thesis of the importance of the individual in historical events. And I will take the opportunity to thank the presence here today of Professor Hartmut Michel, a Nobel Prize winner for chemistry in 1988, and the online presence of Professor Ardem Patapoutian, Nobel Prize for Medicine or Physiology in 2021. Two scientific leaders, and as Napoleon said, they are two distributors of hope. providers of hope. And I also want to thank the participation of Professors Eva Ortega Baino, Director of the Biobank of the CNIO, and General Secretary of RAICEX, the network of associations of Spanish scientists abroad, and Elia Jiménez Toledo, Director of the CSIC. They were collaborators, and today they are not only collaborators but friends. And I'm going to finish with a thought about the importance of science and scientists. I think that our society finally has become aware of the fact that scientific progress is the key for the progress of humanity in all spheres, whether be it medicine, physics, economy, or whatever. And we all must support, strengthen, and promote all policies and initiatives that contribute to make this project a reality. The Ramón Areces Foundation, which is devoted to financing research projects, giving grants, and disseminating scientific knowledge, has as one of its signs of identity to do as much as it can in order for these goals to be achieved to the benefit of our societies. Imagination at Work is a contribution to these goals through the reflections of the main players that have transformed their dreams in reality. As H.G. Wells said, man is like the time machine. If you move it backwards, memories appear. If you move it forwards, dreams appear. At this event, we must remember and dream. Thank you very much. We pass the floor to the General Director of Nobel Prize Outreach, our special friend Laura Sprachman.
Thank you, Raimundo. Gracias. Dear Nobel Prize laureates, Secretaria de Estado para Digitalización y Inteligencia Artificial, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. Good afternoon, buenas tardes. It's such a pleasure to be here with you. This event is special in many ways. It closes this year's season of our podcast series, Nobel Prize Conversations. It brings us back to Madrid, extending our wonderful collaboration with the Fundación Ramón Areces. It allows us to meet again in person, which we all have been longing for after these years of COVID-19. And finally, it celebrates human imagination, imagination in the spirit of the Nobel Prize. Nobel Prize laureate Albert Einstein famously said that, quote, imagination is more important than knowledge because, and I quote again, it embraces all there will ever be. It embraces all there will ever be. Another brilliant and contemporary physics laureate, Frank Wilczek, points out that, and I quote again, though we can't predict the future, we can imagine possible futures. Envisioning how things could and even should work in the universe can help us figure out how they work, and vice versa. These words put Einstein's statement into context in a very profound way. Imagination gives us courage. It gives us hope. It is through imagination that we will be able to face all the great challenges that humanity needs to deal with at the moment, by understanding how things work. Please join me in welcoming Nobel Prize laureate Hartmut Michel, and online Ardem Patapoutian, as well as the director of CCHS at the Spanish National Research Council, Elea Jimenez Toledo, and Biobank Scientific Director at CENIO, Eva Ortega Paino. Together, we will put imagination into work. Finally, I would like to thank our speakers, again, for sharing your experience and expertise. Our dear friends at Fundación Ramón Areces, headed by you, Raimundo, and your wonderful colleagues. A special thanks to you. Our Nobel International partners, 3M, ABB, Capgemini, Ericsson, and Scania, for all your support and friendship. My colleagues at Nobel Prize Outreach, for your excellent work, which I appreciate every day. Y a todos ustedes por venir esta tarde de tanto calor, como Raimundo ha dicho, thank you for being here, and to all of you online. And finally, in the spirit of Alfred Nobel, who said in his will that the prize should be awarded to those who have conferred the greatest benefit to humankind, here we gather together to learn, to imagine, and hopefully contribute in our own way to make this world a bit better. Nobel Prize Outreach is all about inspiring, sharing knowledge, and bringing the values and spirit of the Nobel Prize to the world and sharing it with people around the world. Thank you so much, and enjoy this session.
Good evening, everybody. My name's Adam Smith. I'm the Chief Scientific Officer at Nobel Prize Outreach, and it's my great pleasure to add my welcome to that of Raimundo and Lara to this evening's event. I'll be your moderator for this evening, and it's just so lovely to see you all. Thank you for being here. As you've heard, this event is based around the podcast series, Nobel Prize Conversations, that is so generously supported by the Foundation. And in a while, we'll meet one of the 2021 Nobel laureates, Ardem Patapoutian, who will be joining us online from Southern California. We'll also be joined by Elea Jimenez and Eva Ortega, who you've had introduced. Thank you both very, very much for being here this evening. But first, I'd like to welcome Hartmut Michel on stage. Thank you very much, Hartmut, for coming to Madrid for this. Please join me in welcoming him. So Hartmut is also featured in our current podcast series of 11 episodes. And as Raimundo said, in this conversation, we'll explore both memories and dreams. In a while, we'll focus together with Ardem and our two local participants on this question of imagination at work, the need to ask big questions and the benefit of diversity, but I'd also like to take this opportunity for myself and all of you to get to know the laureates a little bit. So Hartmut, thank you for being here. We were together in southern Germany last week. You like travel, don't you?
I always like travel, and I travel quite a lot. Even when I was a student, I was a backpacker for 9 weeks in India and Nepal, and this provided me with lasting memories.
You mentioned over lunch that you've been to China about 35 times.
Oh, that's right. But I have to say that I'm not the record holder for Nobel Prize winners traveling to China.
Not at all, no.
As far as I know, there's one colleague, Nobel Prize winner, who traveled to China more than 100 times.
So that was pre-pandemic, and of course it's so lovely to be together now that we can be together in person again. You were actually in China, in Wuhan, when the pandemic was just beginning, in January.
That is right, by accident. And We traveled to Wuhan on January 3rd. This was just a few days after the first press releases that there is a new infection going on in Wuhan. So we took masks with us, arriving in Wuhan, but in Wuhan people were very relaxed, and when we asked the people, why are you so relaxed, they say, oh, the whole thing is a very mild thing. That was said by 50%, and the other 50% said, oh, that is a fake, that is not true, and the originals on the fake are in jail, so you are safe. So we didn't use our masks, and I stayed in Wuhan until January 5 before we departed to Beijing.
So everybody was wrong that you spoke to?
Everybody was wrong. Yeah? True.
When you were very young, you dreamt a lot of travel, but you couldn't travel because you didn't have the money to travel back then. It's a very interesting journey from your childhood to being a globetrotter.
Actually, when I was a child, I dreamed. I was a dreamer. And I never was a focused worker. I always dreamed of something else when I was supposed to do this or that. For the moment, I'm still among the persons who hand in their tax declaration at the last possible day. And when I was supposed to do my homework, actually, I was dreaming to be at the Amazon River, collecting orchids, or in New Guinea to do the same. And when I was 12, I dreamed to be the Olympic champion in marathon running when I was 20. So these were my dreams. Yeah?
You had to work very hard as a child, didn't you?
Yes. Family background was that of workers, and my parents had made the decision to buy a house, but they had no money. But they got some loan with the support of some relatives, and they had to pay back the loans. There was no money left, and we tried to grow our own food. So we had several gardens, and I had to work a lot in the gardens, and in particular transport of the harvest to the house or to the place where the apples were converted to juice was a long step. The garden was 4 kilometers away, and with a handcart we had to drive on the same day 2 or 3 times both effects. So it was you can calculate quite a number of kilometers a day with 200 or 300 kilograms of potatoes or apples on the handcart.
I'm just trying to imagine asking my own son to do that. I don't think it would work. So.
No, that was different times.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
For sure. So, but this dreamer, who also had to do a lot of physical labor, somehow found his way to science and was obviously a good student at school. So amongst all this other activity, you did work hard and you did decide that science was where you wanted to go.
Oh, of course, a major point was that I started to do lots of reading, maybe age 10 or 11. Before that, I spent my free afternoons mainly outside, playing, and with 10 or 11, I lended many books from the local library and read about 4 books a week. Part of them were about foreign countries, part of them were about science in the various fields. So history was also among my favorite subjects of reading.
Something I hope we'll explore together when all 5 of us are on stage is what perhaps will replace reading now, because I don't think many young people read. I mean, there are some, of course, who read books, but devices have taken over, so that's something to talk about. Of course,
books may no longer be, but you always have some screens, whatever, in order to get written information. This will not disappear. But what I learned, for instance, in Finland, people don't write anymore in a connected letters in a connected way, as we had to learn at school. They only learn typing. Yeah? So this is progress.
Yeah, it's important to think about. We will also be talking about diversity and the importance of it. Your own background, although you were reading and learning and thinking, wasn't exactly the predicted background for somebody who would join the academic elite in Germany. Did you find the transition difficult?
No, it was not difficult at all. No, it simply went one step after the next one without problem. Actually, one point was when I had finished high school, and I had to go to military service, and before I could start studying, to study. But this also worked out, not from the very beginning, because they didn't accept students at the University of Tübingen from the beginning at the year, but they changed later. And only people who had finished military service were admitted to the university.
Military service is an interesting thing. It's in most countries doesn't exist anymore. Do you think it's a good thing? Do you think it was a good thing for you?
It was a quite unique and positive experience, I have to say, because you are acquainted with all kinds of people. They came mainly from the southwest of Germany, but from all different professions. And unbelievably, I couldn't understand some of the people from the dialect, due to their dialect, living 100 or 150 kilometers away from myself. So there was quite a diversity in dialect and accents in southwest of Germany.
We will come to this question of the magnitude of the scientific question you decided to ask. But I'd like to fast forward to your receipt of the Nobel Prize, which happened when you were just 40 years old. That was 33 years ago, so you've lived not quite half your life as a Nobel laureate, but you received the prize very young indeed. What did that do to life?
Of course, it changes your life. Primarily, you are then a person of public interest. And many people believe that you now know everything, and they ask you about everything. And in particular, I felt, of course, then getting the prize for photosynthesis research to get strong opinion, science-based opinion about biofuels and generally about how to make sure that we have enough energy. So I have very strong opinions about that, and I'm quite outspoken.
Well, actually, okay, so now we have two strands. I'll come back to one of them in a minute. But yes, so the prize was awarded for discovering the structure of the photosynthetic reaction center, which is the heart of photosynthesis. This is at the time, the prize awarding committee quoted what they said was, this is the most important chemical reaction in the world. It was a work of enormous magnitude. Do you feel, let's talk about biofuels, do you feel that biofuels are the way forward?
Biofuel is an enormous waste of land and resources. And the reason for that is that the yield in photosynthesis overall is pretty low. If you consider a tree, and the tree converts only 1% of the sunlight's energy into wood. If you look for a potato, only about 0.4% of the sun's energy is at the end in the potato. So the overall yield in photosynthesis is very, very low. If you look to Germany, we produce diesel from grapeseed. And there the overall yield is 0.08%. And in Germany now we have a harvest of about 4 million tons of rapeseed every year. In addition, 4 million tons of rapeseed are imported from other European countries, and they are used to produce about 3 million tons of biodiesel. And in Germany it's close to 1/4 of the agricultural area which is used to grow rape. And with that, including the imported rapeseed, we can produce about 10% of the diesel which is consumed in Germany every year. So 30 million is the consumption of diesel in Germany every year, and 3 million are produced from rapeseed, using 25% of the German agricultural land, and in addition we import 4 million tons of rapeseed every year to produce that. So, of course, the alternative is that we use photovoltaic cells and we store the electric energy in batteries and use electric engines to drive the cars, of course, the electric cars. And here, the yield of sunlight in this process is by a factor of 500 better than going via the biodiesel. And we can never compete with that technological means by trying to improve photosynthesis. But actually we have to improve photosynthesis in order to make sure that the growing population gets enough food.
Yes. So, of course, the success of photovoltaics does depend on battery technology improving to a certain extent.
That is true. Of course, I think there are ways to improve the energy density, how it's called, of batteries substantially. And for the moment, actually, I see cars which are supposed to, you can travel with them 800 kilometers without reloading, recharging the battery. But so that's a pretty good attitude.
But with the world facing a food crisis, yes, setting aside a quarter of Germany's land for the growing of rapeseed doesn't seem very wise.
No, it's certainly not. And in addition now, of course, due to the war in Ukraine, we have to grow more food, more wheat and other food and other cereals in order to supply Africa with food.
So, thank you. So just before we bring Ardem in, I'd like to stick with this question of what the Nobel Prize does to a 40-year-old at the height of their research career, things moving very fast, suddenly the Nobel Prize lands on you.
Okay. First, of course, when you are awarded the Nobel Prize, many journalists jump onto you. Yeah? And they always ask questions, and for 3 to 6 months you are busy with this. But in general, you also are asked to join circles of society. You are asked to advise companies, pharmaceutical companies in this case in particular, and you're also asked to be an advisor of governments.
So that sounds like it all takes time.
Well, it takes time, and you have to, okay, you only don't have to travel there, you have also to educate yourself before you take such a task.
Did you weigh up what this would do to the research profile?
I didn't weigh up. I still, of course, managed somehow to give, to provide my people with advice and suggestions what kind of research to do.
The reason I'm dwelling on this, of course, is that we're about to speak to a laureate to whom it's just happened. He's also young, not quite as young as 40, but for Ardem, these questions are very fresh, I imagine, that having just received the prize. Yeah, he's wondering, how do I balance all this out? So you may not feel like the voice of authority here, but I think that's your role in this conversation.
Sure.
So let's see if we can bring Ardem into the conversation. Hi, wow, technology works. Ardem, nice, it's lovely to have you with us. Thank you for joining.
Good to see you again, Adam.
That's lovely.
And nice to meet you, Hartmut.
My pleasure.
So you two, I don't think I've met before, but how nice that you're together. So, Ardem, the conversation we were just having was that Hartmut was awarded the Nobel Prize when he was 40, and I was asking what that does to life to suddenly receive it. You're some months into having heard the news, as you heard it last October. What, from your point of view, does receiving the Nobel Prize do to life and your career and all the rest of it?
Yeah, I think I sympathize with what you already heard, and I'm not complaining because I always preface this that no one ever wants to hear a Nobel laureate complain. But after you win this award, you're going to continue doing your work, which is a scientist, but then all these other things come your way from different governments, scientific organizations, journalists asking your advice on all of this. And as we talked a few months ago, Adam, I'm still processing all this and trying to figure out a balance where I can still do the main job that I have, that I love, which is to come to laboratory and do research. But at the same time, of course, it's a massive opportunity to have outreach to society, to emphasize the importance of scientific method and funding for science, for example, for society. And I do feel like I would like to do these new duties. And the key is, again, to balance it all. And it's a learning process. I've given myself a year to figure out how much to engage and where I can make the biggest impact. But yeah, don't get me wrong, it's great fun and a huge opportunity.
I'm sure you're receiving advice from many people who have been through this before, but Hartmut, would you give one piece of advice to Ardem?
My advice is don't accept advice.
It's a good one. I think the best advice I've gotten is to get used to saying no. And I think this applies to everyone, that we say yes to lots of things without thinking through sometimes, and it's important to look at things critically, and it's okay to say no. You don't have to say yes to everything that comes your way.
Finding your own path, which Hartmut, you just basically said, is the way to go, is something you both did in a very radical way. You both asked such enormous research questions. In your case, Hartmut, you set about crystallizing a membrane protein which had never been done, and lots of the textbooks basically said this couldn't be done, and you said yes, it can be done, and you worked first on bacteriorhodopsin and then crystallized the photosynthetic reaction center. In your case, Ardem, you set out to discover what the sensors were for the sense of touch, how the body senses mechanical stimuli. Again, basically an area that was unexplored. So I suppose the question to you both is, what gave you the courage, or simply why did you go after such a big question? Ardem, do you want to go first?
Sure. I think this ties into the put forward earlier very, very much. So the way every scientist that I know is really attracted to what they do through ignorance. I'm actually reading this great book by Stuart Firestein, who's a book called Ignorance, and another one on failure that I'll probably refer to because I'm very fond of these books. And the point of the first one, the ignorance, is again what you heard already, that you win a Nobel Prize in science and people think you have all this knowledge, that you know everything. But the reality is that most scientists are actually driven by ignorance. I don't have more knowledge than probably anyone else. My fascination is about things that I don't know. And that's what drives it, right? So it actually comes from a perspective of ignorance. And once you ask this simple question of how do you sense touch? How does any of these big questions? Then you're already on a right track. And the bigger the question, the better. But I think in science, unlike in the arts, for example, or perhaps other fields, you're much more restricted. Pure imagination is really not enough, right? It also has to be practical at some point. And so I feel like I've always picked my science topics at the intersection of the biggest question that I can think of that is exciting to us, but overlap that with a good dose of, can this be possibly achieved in the next 5-10 years? And the example I like to give as a neuroscientist is the most fascinating thing about neuroscience perhaps is our consciousness. And some people study it, and I'm very grateful that they do. But the reason I don't is because I always ask for this most important question: do I have the tools to understand it in the next 5-10 years if I gave it all? And if the answer is no, then you just wait a little bit more. But I think that's the key for me, is have the imagination, ask for the biggest question, but you can't leave behind the practicality of, is this really doable? And that last part is not as easy as that, right? Because deciding if something is doable or not is subjective, is intuitive. I often also talk about informed intuition as an important part of scientific decisions, of this knowledge that you have that you apply, and it's not certain. You will fail, we all fail. We have to agree that failure is a big part of discovery process, and you have to be okay with that.
Thank you very much indeed. Hartmut, do you want to comment?
Actually, of course, important point is you have to live with failures. But once you have got a Nobel Prize, the failure is then with your co-workers, and that is not a good thing. Because if they fail with the experiments, it's unsure whether they were unable or whether your own imagination was not correct, the proposal was not correct. So I prefer the latter to be right. But I can only decide it if I would do the experiments myself.
But you can't just do experiments.
I can't just no, I don't find the time to do experiments myself. Maybe now as a retired person I might be able to start again.
But that's an interesting thing, that you have a group, and yes, you can take a chance on your own imagination, but you have a group to nurture and to bring on, and you can't just let them flounder if your own imagination fails you.
Yeah, right.
Yes, that's a good point. Ardem, how do you deal with that?
I got lost a little bit. How do I deal with what exactly?
I'm sorry. Hartmut made the point that one can take a gamble on one's own. One can ask a question. If it fails, okay, I failed. But science is done in teams, and so you bring along a team with you, and they're on the same path. So how do you look after people while taking chances, I suppose, is the question.
Yeah, I have a system where I encourage my young students and postdocs to take big risks. But at the same time, I think it's so important for us to think of their careers. If a postdoctoral fellow in my lab works for 5 years and it fails, and I give the lecture that failure is part of science, too bad, that's not great. And so what we've come together is that if we take a very big, risky project, we do it in collaborations. And on the side, each of these trainees have more what we call bread and butter project. And again, this is a combination of practicality and imagination that I'm talking about. I think you can do high-risk work while mitigating risk by making sure that your trainees have an out. They have a way to proceed with their career. Because, as much as high-risk and imaginative projects are wonderful and important for science, at the end of the day, people who do the work have to show something, have to show publications to proceed in their career. So again, we mitigate that by balancing it out.
Okay, we do it absolutely the same way. So the people doing the really high-risk projects, they always do some bread and butter projects in parallel.
Mm-hmm. In the audience here, you have people responsible for funding decisions and making sure that research flourishes in many fields. Do you feel that the research environment is becoming more favorable or less favorable to the risk takers in your different countries?
I could start if you want. I feel like there is an effort in the United States to encourage high risk, but I have to say that the default is not that way. And so most funding decisions are, I think, done in a wrong way. So when we write a grant to the government, to the National Institutes of Health, they want every aim and sub-aim of the grant to be rock solid so that it will work and will give rise to success. Any part of the grant not having a high chance of success is deemed almost unfundable. And I think that this is so wrong about how science works. I often compare this to baseball, one of the national sports in the United States, where one of the best players ever, if they have a hitting percentage of 0.3, often called 300, which means every time they come at bat, they're successful 1 out of 3 times, they are considered amazing baseball players. So we accept that risk as part of the failure percentage. But for some reason, for scientists, what I think the failure rate has to be higher because you're taking risks. We judge grants by having to be 100% fruitful. And again, both the NIH, which I give credit to them, is trying to mitigate this, and other institutions such as Howard Hughes Medical Institute that I'm part of, again, are very aware of this and indeed want you to do something very fundamental and don't micromanage projects. But this is something that funding agencies really have to take into consideration, that they're going, I understand the feeling to want to make sure that when you're spending, public money, that it's not wasted. But I think one has to look at it from a 10,000-foot view and realize that this is how, not just science, technological advancements for, new companies and in the tech industry are all the same. You have to take risks, you have to have failure to have success, and this has to be acknowledged at every level of society and given time to flourish. Because again, not just the failure, it takes a lot of time to have these new discoveries be applied to help society.
I suppose failure is a difficult word. Is failure the right word in a way?
I think failure is a beautiful word. It has taken on a bad meaning perhaps, but fail better. I don't remember who said this. Someone has said this. There's good failure, and I think if you're asking the right questions with known risk factors and you're failing at a rate that is in a way normal given the question you're asking, it's a wonderful thing, and it is difficult to accept, to deal with, to go forward, but it's just an integral part of the discovery process.
I do agree, but your first question about science becoming more competitive, I clearly have to say yes. And the reason for that is that the number of scientists all over the world has increased dramatically. In particular, you now have competition from China. And quite often it happens, you start off a very interesting, maybe medically relevant project. For instance, we try to study transport molecules which are essential for cancer cells. And if we'd be able to stop these transporters, we might find a way to cure cancer. So this is one thing which we do. So we study these transporters, but the chance that you are scooped by someone else, quite often a person from China, is very high. And so that's bad for it's good for the system because you speed up discoveries, relevant discoveries, but it's not good for your own co-worker who is not the first one.
So competition is good because it makes things happen. It just makes everybody work harder, but it's a cruel system because, yeah.
Yes,
is there another system? Is there an alternative?
Of course, alternative would be that you give each scientist a permanent position from the very beginning, so the person could do research of interest. But normally, saying the pressure and the working attitude is not as hard if people work with limited contracts as they do in the current system and have to look for the next position.
Just before I bring Alea and Eva up on stage, we also have young people in the audience. And Ardem, your description of picking a question that is challenging but answerable in 5 years sounds fantastic, but it also sounds like you have to be you have to have the art of making that decision of what that is. To a young person who's just starting out, who is extraordinarily curious, but keen to ask a big question, what would you advise?
I think that for young people, it depends on what level you're talking about. I think in high school and college, it's more of finding what excites you and what you can do good at and you can be good at. I have a son who's about to go to college, and when I think about the steps that I went through to decide, and we heard a very nice story from Hartmut as well, it's such a unpredictable, and chance plays a huge part in us deciding what we do. And I feel that in the United States, for example, there's so much effort on having these young individuals who are growing up have the focus on what college they go to, what university they get accepted to. And I have a really disagree with this. And I, again, think about my career of how, you know, I thought I was going to go to medical school. I actually worked in a laboratory only because I wanted a letter of recommendation from a professor. I had no interest in science or lab work at that time. And this chance experience made me realize this is what I really, really love, and I'm good at it. And I wish there was more organized ways to help kids find their niche, what they're really good at, what they can contribute to society. And I don't have an answer, but I think it's a wonderful thing for society to think about. Maybe with all the AI going on, maybe we can have great predictions of what people should, what fields should go into. Of course, that has a sinister side to it too. But the reality of it is, I think most young people should just try to explore as many things as possible. Because, you know, I took chemistry lab in college and I hated it. But I loved lab in actual scientific method because they're actually done in very different ways. You know, one is knowledge-based, the other is discovery-based. And so the only advice I have right now is explore a lot of things, immerse in different ways and see what's your calling and what you like. I think that's the first important step. The rest, in any field that you have, you can figure out, you know, what's the best way for you to go forward. But the first step is to find your calling. And I do believe most people have callings. And the more I read about the other people going through the process, it seems also random. And I wish there was a way we can help people find their ultimate careers in a more organized way.
Thank you. Hartmut, would you like to?
Okay, that's a very good advice. I simply can join.
Good. We have consensus on stage. Great. That's a good time to bring Alea and Eva up. Please, would you join us? Should we be like one of the panel shows on TV and you move to the end seat and they come here? What do you think? Let's try it. Let's get some motion going. Would you like to sit down?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi. So thank you so much for joining. Eva, you've been listening. Do you have any reflections on what's been said so far?
I didn't even take notes.
Yeah,
maybe we need 3 hours more to start talking about. I think no one can judge me on not having imagination. I'm quite an imaginative person. But what I never imagined is to be sitting here with you today, with Ardem and Hartmut. It's a huge pleasure to share it with you, Adam. And I want to thank the Fundación Ramón Areces for giving us this opportunity, and of course the Nobel Foundation Outreach to have us here. So, I mean, I have so many comments that, well, I don't think, in opposite to what you say, that I'm going to complain to receive this award. I'm not going to receive it at all. So I'm safe of this. And also, I mean, it's quite interesting when what Ardem mentioned, because it is true that it's very difficult to be imaginative if you have to produce. I mean, and it's true that you have to go to the safe side. So maybe we have to think in a system that allows us to publish negative results. Maybe it should be a very high-impact journal of negative results, because it's true that knowledge is built by positive and negative results. They are so good, both of them, that we can learn from experiences.
Thank you. That's a very interesting point. Ardem, I noticed you smile at the idea of a journal of negative results. Of course, it's something that comes up once in a while. Tell us, what do you think?
There's some progress towards this. You know, there is all these public databases like bioRxiv that, you know, now publishes any result irrespective of significance or irrespective of impact. So if you publish data and your conclusions are within the bounds of your data, then it's not peer reviewed, it's just out there for for people to comment, build upon, and most importantly, not to repeat. I feel like there's so much waste in people repeating negative results because people don't publish them. So I encourage my folks to publish. I'm not very successful because it takes time to publish this and no one gives them credit for it still. But I think it will change. It will slowly become this sharing of data more fluid instead of this very formal journal-based peer-reviewed systems. Again, I'm all for peer review, of course, but I think there has to be a way for people to just show data without worrying about that. And publish first, peer review later is a tag word that's going around that I think is going to get some traction.
Can I just let's just stay with publication for a minute, because it's such an important aspect of science in so many ways, not least for the young people who are desperately trying to build a career based around publishing with the best publishing houses, the best journals. There is quite a big move, of course, to try and change it from lots of different directions, but on the other hand, the hold of the big publishing houses is very strong. Ardem, do you have a particular take on how, and I'm going to come to you in a second, on how to handle the drive to publish in Science, Cell, Nature all the time?
Yeah, it's a very complicated issue, Adam. I mean, I think we all agree that our publication system is a little bit broken. The system is slow. The system prefers some folks over others. The peer review is great, but not completely fair. And these few journals that you mentioned have way too much power for things like people's promotions, funding, etc. So it would be great to democratize this, but it's not an easy thing to do because I think, as we heard, science is in biomedical research is getting larger and larger, and many of us don't have ways to keep up with the literature, the whole of literature. And so we use different methods to decide what we are going to read. We can have keywords that when they come up in our field, we see it. We follow people on Twitter, and if you see someone you like, say, oh, this paper is good, you read it. The other way people used to do it is, and I still do, is look at Science, Nature, Cell, these top journals, as information that you should read, even if it's not in your field, just to get a broad understanding of science. So if we get rid of this so-called high-impact journals, which the term already is, some people argue that should be high-impact papers, not journals, something else needs to replace it, and we haven't quite figured out what that is yet. But lots of people are committed to get this to work, from funding agencies to top scientists, and I think good changes hopefully will come in the next few years.
Thank you. Adaya, broadening this from pure science, you direct the Center for Human and Social Sciences, and you're very interested in this question of bibliodiversity. How does this particular question apply across the human and social sciences?
Thank you, Adam. Let me say, first of all, thank you to everyone. Thank you to Nobel Prize Outreach for this extraordinary initiative and for let us share all being part of this extraordinary conversation. And also to the Fundación Ramón Areces. This is a question very different between these domains, because it's true in science, technology, and medicine. There are some common patterns for publishing results, and they are quite different from humanities and social science, where we usually publish books, chapters, and we usually publish in national journals and moreover in our languages. So bibliodiversity and also multilingualism in scientific communication are key questions for us, because we need to provide research results to our near community, to our close community, and we need to communicate in our own language. So this has an impact in research evaluation systems. This is not the same in STEM fields, where impact factor has been strong during a lot of time. But now we are seeing the change of research assessment models, even in STEM fields. But we need to protect and to give this insight from social science and humanities. We need to protect our national infrastructures for giving plurality to different voices in human science and social science through the small and medium imprints in each country that are publishing contents in... Sure. That are providing contents with societal relevance and in our languages. So the model is quite different from STEM fields.
Quite different. But what interesting questions you raise. So there are several strands I'd like to pick up on, and I should say that we have microphones, and I'm going to open to the audience for comments and questions very soon. So please be ready. Preserving the plurality of thought, and this all links into the question of dreaming and imagination and how you bring the greatest diversity of ideas into any field, whether it's social sciences or humanities or science. You've pointed out very nicely that it matters greatly to have that diversity of voices in your fields. Hartmut, does it matter what language, let's start there, science is done in? We're working in English today. Obviously, in your institute, you work in German. Does it matter that English is becoming the lingua franca for scientific communication?
English is the lingua franca in the lab.
In the lab? Oh, right.
It's no other language anymore.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So does that matter?
Oh, I don't think so. The only problem is if you have to deal with authorities, you have to have somebody who is a native speaker and a native German speaker, in order, because you have the people, for instance, genetic engineering officer.
Yeah.
This person should be a German-speaking, native German speaker in similar positions. For this, you need the Germans. Right? Otherwise, communication in the lab is English.
I remember a talk by Nobel laureate Leo Esaki, Japanese, arguing that actually doing science in Japanese, not in English, made you do science slightly differently, and that it was important to preserve Japanese language science for the difference in the thought pattern and the imagination that brought to the subject. I don't know, Ardem, do I'm dealing with multilingual people, and I myself am the only person on the panel who am boringly monolingual, so I apologize for that. So what do you think, Ardem?
There's something to it. English was not my first native language. I'm Armenian origin, grew up in Lebanon, and I came to United States when I was 18. So although I had become, I think there's different levels of fluency. So although I was rather fluent in English, when it came time to communicate science, give scientific talks, I clearly realized that that live thinking and talking at the same time about science was a bigger challenge for me than native English-speaking speakers. And so there's clearly an important thing to consider. Imagine all these scientists who might have, brilliant ideas, but their English is not up to par to communicate it correctly, and how much is that lost opportunity for the science world? I'm not sure what the solution is. I think it does make sense to have a universal language so we can all communicate. It's important to have as wide of a net as possible for everyone to be able to communicate in science, but it shouldn't be at the expense of someone from Japan or Germany or Spain to, if their English is not as good, to be at any disadvantage. And so, again, another difficult question that there's no easy answer to, but I think it helps if scientists and society in general are at least aware of this fact and again, for example, when people do peer review, and we talked about this, sometimes people criticize the grammar and English in a way that is, I think, people should think twice about doing, and realize that this is coming from someone who's going at, great effort just to be able to do as well as they've done. And to criticize the work for not being clear and this and that should be done in a very productive, positive way, instead of, criticism, which I've heard a lot of that goes on.
Thank you, Ardem. Eva, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, I'm going to play a little bit of the devil advocate. And I must say that it's true, we need a lingua franca, but on the other hand, we have a duty with the society. Scientists must disseminate knowledge to the society. And for reaching this point, we need to talk to the society in the language they know. So we cannot expect everyone to speak English or any other language. Then, of course, as a Spanish defender that I am, we have more than 400 million people in this world talking Spanish as a mother tongue. So we have also a duty there. And if I have to be fully honest, and maybe we can open a debate here, it breaks inequity within societies, because we expect countries that they have to learn and publish in a language that for them can cost a lot. They have to have someone, maybe they don't have the languages, they are forced maybe to travel abroad, which is good. I think it's good for the scientific career when you finish your PhD to go abroad, as I did. My PhD was long. I spent 17 years in Sweden, but it could be shorter. Then you bring back knowledge, a language, and also add something that is very important, that is cultural living. But I think that maybe we can force inequity in countries that they have to publish in these big journals that they cost a lot of money. It's not cheap either to make a very successful career, and also they have to be able to communicate in their own language. So I fully agree that imagination works better in your own language.
Hartmut, would you like to come in?
Actually, for the communication with in your own country, you have to use your native language of the country. But on the other hand, I have the problems if I'm going to give a scientific talk in English, in German, sorry, then the German term doesn't come to me, because there is no German term. Yeah? Because all these new inventions only get English expressions. So there's no official translation of these terms.
So when you dream about the structure of cytochrome oxidase, as you do now, yeah. Mostly I guess it's pictures and molecules moving around, but where words come, are they German or English? Or?
They are without language. That is in formulas.
So formulas, it all comes down to chemistry, and that's the solution, right? That's another lingua franca. Ardem, what about you? What language do you dream in, scientifically?
I think it's mainly English now. It's really funny. The only thing I still, in my head, do in Armenian is counting. Everything else has become English. I don't understand exactly why or how, but that's where we are.
What about you, Eva? You've had 17 years in Sweden, but I guess Swedish didn't become the language of your dreams.
It comes in many ways, like words, like regular words like kindergarten, we don't use that, we say doggies, and it's always doggies. But of course in science, I mean, you tend to think in English because it's the language that you use with your peers, but since I do a lot of dissemination, I mean, just communication of science, it's very important to keep our heritage, language heritage alive. Because, well, of course, languages are dynamic. Now it's English, before it was German, French, Italian, Latin, so they flow. We never know. We can't let it behind. Maybe in the future it's Spanish. In 10 years we're doing this outreach in Spanish because we manage. So I think I try to mix. It's an effort that I make every day to find the right word in my own language to communicate, not only to my peers in Spain, but also to, as I mentioned, the general public. But I'm very happy that I'm able also to speak Swiss and English. I can't complain.
Okay, Alair, you started this debate, so last word on languages to you. Go on.
Okay, Eva points out an idea quite important in this debate. It's about the nuances of the language, of our languages. When we express an idea, a concept in our language, we are using an underlying concept, and it can be understood if we translate it into another languages in another way. So when we use our own languages, we are giving a precise meaning of what we want to say. And there are two another ideas related to this topic, and one of these is how we should use the language, our own language, for communicating with the general public, and how include general public in our research. This is the concept of citizenship science. And this is quite relevant because the approaches from other public and the ideas from outside, from our lab or our department, are very useful for stimulating, for boosting our creativity, our imagination. So we need the outside insights from other disciplines, from other contexts, from other languages, for giving pieces of information, for giving signals, and consciously or unconsciously, suddenly, we are going to have an idea, we are going to cross the ideas and to have a new hypothesis or a new approach to our research.
It's a very interesting idea, because so many people talk about the public understanding of subjects, sciences and social sciences and many things, and the importance of doing that in order to get support for the people doing the research. And therefore, citizen science is good because it involves people. But it's always done as a kind of push towards the science, towards the public. Help them understand, and then they'll support us. The idea of them supporting with ideas and boosting your creativity by doing it, I don't hear that said very much, and I think that's a very interesting thought. I don't know whether people want to pursue it, but I'd like to extend the language conversation, but into a different sort of language, because we also want to talk a little bit about diversity and the importance of diversity in backgrounds in research. And of course, one way of looking at that is people speaking different languages, not so much Spanish or English, but rather the language of your background, whether you come from a different culture or indeed you come from a different discipline. You might be a molecular biologist moving into chemistry or something. So, Hartmut, you came, as we've already talked about, from a background that wasn't academic into academia. Ardem, you came from a background of being brought up in Lebanon, then moving as an immigrant to the States and finding yourself in a new world. These are both transitions. How important do you think diversity is to the productivity of science in general? Hartmut first. Okay,
and in our field, you need various different expertises. For instance, you need physicists, you need biochemists, you need molecular biologists, you need geneticists. And you have them all to work together and to be able to talk to each other. And the language of physicists is normally quite different. They quite often think in states, and chemists think in terms of structures. So we have to bring them together to be able to talk to each other.
Thank you. Ardem.
I think diversity is so important in science and discovery, and some aspects of this are very well recognized in science. So for example, history of biomedical research, there was a whole wave of, as you just heard, physicists turning into biological questions, from the discovery of the DNA structure all the way in those decades. Was such an important part to give this different perspective of a physicist looking at a biological question. And this is so inherent in biomedical research. So for example, when I get trained in my PhD, normally before you become a professor, you do postdoctoral research, which is equivalent of residency in the medical school. It is expected almost that most would completely change their fields within biomedical research. And there's a particular reason for this, and that is you then come into a new field with a new perspective. So I've done this multiple times in my career, and I feel like when you come to a field, you sometimes look at it and say, oh my gosh, they're kind of looking at this all wrong. I mean, I might be wrong, but the point is that the different perspective, what you know and what you bring to a new field is wonderful thing. And this is, again, completely accepted in the scientific field. But I would argue that many other types of diversity that we don't acknowledge also play a massive role. And this was a little bit discussed already from the language perspective, is that if you come from China or Middle East or Southern Europe or Northern Europe or America, you have very different, again, perspectives on life, perspectives on your educational system and how you think about problems. And we need all of this in one place to be effective. And it's so diversity is not just to make sure that underrepresented people and scientists are given equal rights, which is of course very important, but there's actually good coming from this kind of diversity. And I'll just end by saying that this already exists much better in science than other sectors of society. When I give a seminar, my last slides are to acknowledge people in my lab. And other than showing the list of people, I also show a map of the world, putting a pin on every area that someone in my lab was born in. And you could see they come from all over the world, at least Northern Hemisphere. So we need to work better in incorporating people from Southern Hemisphere, but it's much better than the rest of society. And I can't emphasize how important that diversity is to the success of my lab. And so, yeah, I'm a huge fan of diversity of all kinds, to not just for science, for society to go forward and be the best it can be.
Thank you very much indeed. Leah, and then Eva, and then we'll go to questions. Please.
Thank you, Adam. Yeah, it's a very interesting question, the interdisciplinarity in our work, because you usually have a singular approach from your own discipline, and when you start to work with other groups from other disciplines, first you notice that the languages are different, the approaches are different, so your point of view can change daily and can change suddenly. And it's a way of enriching your research. It's a need for current research. And we can see the current examples of how European science policies conducting their research framework, where they are boosting the interdisciplinary research, creating special frameworks for boosting interdisciplinary research and for facing global challenges, because otherwise it's difficult to get.
That's a painful point to make to a British moderator at the moment. As we lose our association status along with Switzerland. Sorry, Karen.
No, just a brief recommendation. I enjoyed a lot listening to the lecture by Ardem Patapoutian for accepting the Nobel Prize last December 2021, and it's amazing how he was presenting his research about the sense of touch, and he immediately goes to the topic of emotions. So I was wondering how an anthropologist or how a social scientist, a psychologist can see or can interact with this kind of research you are conducting from another point of view, the cell point of view, and so on. And this is really, really enriches the research.
Sometimes sometimes I've proposed doing a panel on emotion in science, and most scientists run away from that idea. They think, emotion? What does that have to do? But here you have one who embraces it, so maybe we'll explore that in the Q&A. Alea. I'm sorry, Eva, sorry.
Oh, no worries. I mean, I must declare myself as a big fan of diversity, and there's an Islamic proverb that says that a lot of different flowers make a bouquet, and I think it's true. And diversity can be seen in many ways, as we say, cultural diversity, and it's been proven that diversity, this transnational mobility that we do, usually to develop countries, they make them even richer. And it seems that the brain gain, there are two effects. When people go to another country and this country receives them, is a brain gain. And when the country loses these brains, is a drama, really, that it happened here many years ago. But this brain gain makes this country even more richer in science, because the diversity, the way of thinking, even though we are all humans, we have different ways, cultural-based ways of thinking. This is one of the diversity points that I really like, and I enjoy myself as well in Sweden, that we were in Lund, people for over, 120 different countries. So I think it's marvelous, like traveling without moving. You know, you can learn everything just being sitting in a lab and listening to the others. But another diversity point that I would love to remark, and I'm lucky to work with, is diversity, like this discipline, multidisciplinary diversity. As you mentioned, I work in a biobank, and although it has the word bank, it's a good bank. We store samples for research. And we don't only store samples for research and do science on them, we also think with ethical issues. We think about philosophy, law, artificial intelligence, and also big data, what to do with this data that is produced in amounts from humans, from sequencing, how to deal with it. So it opens your brain in a completely different way to be able to tackle disciplines from all corners. So yeah, I declare myself, as I said, a big fan. I think it's absolutely mandatory, and the world is diverse. Without talking about, of course, of gender diversity, that is another topic that it doesn't come here. But yes, diversity is really important for success.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Eva. So, questions, please, and comments. I think it's been absolutely fascinating listening to our panelists. Thank you very much indeed. I'd love. Great question at the back there. If you could have a microphone. And you're welcome to ask questions in Spanish or English. We have a translator for those of us like me who wouldn't understand the Spanish, but. So either way.
Hello.
Hi.
Let's see if I make it clear. I would like to get back to the catchy title of this fantastic panel, and I think it was to approach lightly imagination at work, creativity, and I would like to ask the four guests, when was the last time they felt the creative factor in the day-to-day, how that happened, that they understood something new was coming, something new was happening. So when was the last time they felt like, wow, something is coming up? If I was clear. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Capturing a creative moment, when was the last time? Who wants to? Let's go in order, just down the row. Ardem first, please. Sorry.
I think, creative moments, I'm not going to dwell on these big eureka moments that are very rare. I will instead talk about the day-to-day creative thoughts that we need as scientists to advance prioritization projects, new ideas. And to me, two things are important. And again, this is interesting because in society it's usually the other way around. The first is super important to me, not to be very busy. When you're busy, you're not being creative. I believe in this very strongly. And indeed, most of these ideas that come to me almost always come outside the office when I'm outdoor, running, walking, again and again. And to create this also, I've created now this thing where Tuesdays I don't have any meetings. And sometimes I work from home, sometimes I work from my office, but zero tolerance for meetings. And again, this allows the mind to wander, and I don't put any, like I don't say I have to sit down and read for 3 hours, or I just let it happen. And I feel like in these kind of free times is when the best ideas always come. And I don't think people do that enough, to leave enough empty space to let the brain wander and come up with ideas instead of having it very structured.
Thank you very much indeed. Interesting idea of a meeting-free Tuesday. One of your fellow laureates from 2021 has a food-free Monday. He doesn't eat on Mondays, apparently. That's Ben, that's Ben List. Maybe people could become creative by replicating the kind of combined 2021 laureate week. No food on Monday, no meetings on Tuesday. See how it goes. Hartmut, yours is Wednesday, right?
I didn't try this. Actually, I'm pretty clear about when the last time I had a creative idea. I actually was lying in the hospital with a ruptured hamstring, and I had just got an operation, and I got via internet the results of a student. And the student had actually determined the structures of intermediates of the reaction cycle of cytochrome C oxidase. He was unable to find the correct interpretation. And after looking at that, I clearly could tell him that he has to turn the cycle around by 180 degrees. So this was simply a result of being in the hospital and having time.
Seems to be a pattern here.
I feel very much the same as Ardem. I mean, usually it happens when I'm swimming, so it's difficult to take notes, so I forget immediately, you know. I'm just there thinking, I say, what can I do? And then suddenly something brilliant comes. You don't have any piece of paper and a pen, so it's gone. But, I mean, I'm quite dangerous because my brain never stops. And also, it's not creative in the way of big discoveries, but I'm working more on translational medicine. I have to involve people, donors. In the case of my work, is cancer patients, but it could be anyone. So I had 2 ideas recently. One was just getting a cohort, just collecting samples from a population that are the flight attendants, and they were very happy. So we could manage to pick blood and different other samples just to see what happens when they get sick. So we will have this cohort when they were healthy and when they develop a disease. And the other one that I didn't manage, but I'm just asking you for help. It was like, I would like to I don't know if you see the blood bus that goes through villages. I don't know if you have it in England and other countries. You have a bus, a little lorry that goes and collects samples, blood samples for transfusion. Yes. I would love to do the same with patients. Having my mobile unit, I'm going to encourage these cancer patients and relatives, healthy individuals, to create cohorts that can help for ulterior research, to help and provide. So I need money. I need to see. You told us that there was people funding here. So that's why I came. Yeah.
Great. This has turned into a pitch. Feel free.
Exactly. I have to take the opportunity.
Thank you. So swimming. And Alea.
For me, the moment for creativity, or where you are able, or I'm able to cross ideas or to have a creative moment, are nights. I don't know why, but the brain works in another way. And for example, within the framework of an interdisciplinary thematic platform that we are developing at the Spanish National Research Council, working on Spanish as language of science communication. We are working together with experts in natural language processing, with terminologists, with linguistics, with people from information and communication and so on, and working together and listening to them carefully. I'm taking ideas, I'm taking signals, I'm taking hints during the process, and suddenly, usually in the night, a magic moment comes, and the ideas are crossing, and it's an idea that usually is fruitful for a project, for pointing out an hypothesis or giving an interpretation to any results or whatever. So it's a process. We need to consider it as a process, not just a single moment, but in a single moment you cross all the ideas. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for the lovely question. And note to self: cancel all meetings in future. Please, there was a question here, and then they're coming now. So great.
Yes. Well, I would like to share with you one personal story on imagination at work, to emphasize the importance of imagination at work, and to thank you for this very important conversation. This was in the year 1966. I was working as professor of biochemistry of Granada. I was working in the Department of Biochemistry of Oxford with a Nobel laureate, very famous Professor Hans Krebs, the author of the Krebs cycles, etc. And I was working in rare disease diagnosis, because afterwards we started in Spain what is now la prueba del talón, in order to prevent in the children, in the newborn, these diseases. Well, I was working one Friday around 7 o'clock, it's quite late for them. And Professor Krebs has forgotten something in his lab. He came and he saw lights in my own laboratory. He came and said, "What are you doing here? One Friday, and at 7 o'clock, go home." And I said, well, but you know, Professor, I need to work very much here because I need to have a lot of data. Because in Granada I have not these instruments you have here. And therefore I would like to take a lot of this. And he told me, "Federico, from now on, you will not come to work on Friday. You will remain at home Friday, Saturday, and Sunday." And I thought, why? He's punishing me? Why? And he said, "No, Federico," and this is what I would like now to repeat. He said, "Success depends on to see what others can see and to think what nobody has thought. To think what nobody has thought, this is success, this is real research." And today, sometimes we are perhaps having too many data, but we need to think more on what really can, with imagination at work, can provide a different result and something really important. To think what nobody has thought. And I must add another thing. After a very long life, today I think that the only hope that we have is precisely that every single human being is able to create. This is our hope. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the beautiful contribution. And indeed, so that combined with the comments we had, the 4 comments we had, points in one direction, which is just not to cloud your thinking by too much else. Gosh. A couple more questions. Yes, there's one here, please. Sorry, I'm sorry if I get the order wrong, but just up here, please.
Yes, my question is to all of the researchers here, is that if I try to search, there's an article in Nature which is about the growing inaccessibility of science. And if I want to read it, I'll have to pay $10, by the way. So as a young researcher, we are always facing these questions here, like how can we access science? Like as an Erasmus student, I have on 3 institutional access to different literature. But still, sometimes we feel stuck. There's always a paywall between us and knowledge. So how do we actually recover from this thing?
Thank you very much indeed. That is a beautiful irony, isn't it? Paying $10 to read about inaccessibility. In the interest of time, I think I won't go to all researchers. I might go to 2 people on this one. Elea, I'll come to you first, and Ardem maybe. But Elea, please.
Thank you, Adam. We are working all together in Open Science Movement. This is an answer to this problem, because public knowledge is public and usually funded by public funds, and we need to boost the debate about the biggest publishing companies that are putting this kind of walls for accessing to knowledge. We should think that publishing companies have their own business, and we need to understand their point of view. But it's true that we have seen very, very heavy models, business models, putting this kind of walls for accessing knowledge. So I think open science is one of the answers. We need, from the public institutions, the private institutions conducting research, we need to defend this movement. And we need also, it's very important, to think about the business, the alternative business models, including the publishing companies, because we need to know that publishing infrastructures at the national level, they are also investing in publishing science, and we need to protect this kind of infrastructure. So we need to consider the whole system, and we need to protect this access to knowledge for everyone.
Yeah, very true. Some would say that the situation is getting very desperate and radical action is needed, but yeah. Ardem.
And open access is a very important question for science and publications. And there's some things being done. The institution that funds my lab, for example, I mentioned already, the Howard Hughes Medical Institute, now does not allow me to publish in any journal that's not immediately open access. And what that means is, if I publish in Nature paper, I have to pay them $10,000 for them to make it public immediately. Now, of course, I realize that, well-funded lab like mine can afford it. Many labs cannot. And so that's not a permanent solution. People are working towards this. I mean, meanwhile, if you need a paper, just email it to me and I'll send it to you illegally. I don't mind.
That's a result from a question. I like that. Next question, please. Sorry. Yes, please. Yeah. And I see you at the back there. Yes. So.
Hello, and thank you to the whole panel for a most interesting conversation. So what you're discussing today is that curiosity, creativity, and imagination are very useful skills or traits to have in order to advance science. And you could probably argue that they are also relevant for creating startup companies or in many other human activities. So why don't we train for those skills or try to foster them from primary school to high school and through to university. It looks to me like we are not doing it. What's your opinion of that?
Sorry, Ardem, to come back to you, but you did talk about how to help people find their career paths earlier. So can I ask you to address that first?
I think this is so important. I really, really do. And I think this is something that can be easily done, from how teachers in elementary schools to high school to college, how it's taught, how parents give advice and help their kids. If you don't mind, I was thinking about this, and I just want to give you one quote from a novelist, Peter Rock, who's also my friend. He wrote a book called The Night Swimmers. And in it, this really made an impact to me. The father gives this advice to his son and says, one of the greatest pleasures, one of the most important uses of time is to daydream. Now, I read this and I thought, my dad would never say that to me. And I don't think I ever said that to my son, but I love it. And why don't we emphasize, instead of the learning knowledge, accumulating knowledge, also the creativity part of how important it is to daydream, to learn how to imagine, and how this is also an important aspect of, so our whole education system and our mentality is not geared towards this. And I'm not an expert on this field of sociology, but there's probably pretty good evidence that these are important things to teach, and I don't think we do it. At least I have not experienced it in my education.
There's a David Bowie line in a song, which is, if the homework gets you down, we'll throw it on the bus, or throw it on the fire and take the bus downtown. And I always hoped that I'd be the sort of dad who would say that to my child, but unfortunately you end up saying, haven't you done your homework yet? So it's terrible. You turn into the person you didn't want to be when you're a parent. Isn't that awful? Hartmut, you have children, young children. So do you encourage them to daydream?
I ask her quite often what she's just dreaming about. But she says always nothing. Yeah?
Maybe.
But I'm sure she daydreams.
Yeah. But children is a difficult subject for a panel. Ava, quickly on this question. And then
I have my kids there. Usually they just play on the PlayStation. But I think we should encourage. It's an extremely good point, to be honest. And I read somewhere that knowledge gives the answers, but imagination gives the questions to unsolved doubts. And for this point, we need creativity, and we need all these values that we talk today. But funnily enough, having said this, there's a point, especially in Spain, when, if you allow me to make an analogy within football, we have Premier League and First Division studies. So we, very early in kids' studies, we make, oh, you're very clever, you're going to go to science. Oh, well, so we already classify kids without bringing the knowledge in an holistic way. I mean, it's something that Elea mentioned, multidisciplinary way of thinking is needing to be not only creative, to be, again, a rounded person. So I think we are making the mistake from the very beginning with kids. We don't allow them to express anything that is not fitting our patterns. And I think it should change.
Thank you. Yes, question up here. Thank you. I see you there as well. I don't know how long we can go on for, but...
Hello? Okay, it works. My question is about how much of a role skepticism should bring when bringing up with like the imagination at work. And I'm asking this because the main 2 points I've thought of is the first one, how like early on the moderator brought about Hartmut's work, that he brought the term of crystallized proteins, when at the time it was thought of as, not possible, like simply not scientifically possible, but then you came along and proved them wrong. And then my second point would be, I guess, watching the news, like how a lot of people have taken skepticism to such an extreme point that we're actually blocking our imagination. We're saying that actually this can't be possible, like, or even like going backwards. I guess the most popular example I can think of is flat earthers, just going back and actually blocking our access. So my question would be, how much of a role should skepticism have, in bringing imagination into work?
Thank you very much indeed. Whew, yeah. Okay, Hartmut, since you look worried by that question, I'm going to give it to you.
That's a very important question. Yeah? And I belong to the people who are much more skeptical than the average person. I always ask, is this true, what I'm told? And I think whether there are alternative scenarios. For instance, what I'm skeptical about the second law of thermodynamics. If we would be able to show that this is true, we would solve all crises of mankind. Russia would make no money from energy export because everywhere in the world, everybody could generate his or her own energy at the place where it is. But I think this is a dream. But I still have to think about it.
You're in very good company being skeptical about the second law of thermodynamics. The physicist T.D. Lee, who was awarded the Nobel Prize at the age of 31, was a refugee in China and first came across it in a textbook when he was 16. And I remember him saying that he read it, and everybody else says, okay, I've learnt that and I'll move on, except for you, you're skeptical. But he read it and he said, no, that can't be true. And I think that's an extraordinarily interesting response to a textbook, to think it can't be true at the age of 16. It shows a particular curiosity and imagination. Ardem, do you want to address the question of skepticism?
Very briefly, I guess. I think, like anything else we're discussing, it's just a matter of amounts, right? So I think skepticism is so important for scientific method. But being cynical is maybe crosses the line and just you're overly negative. So I think healthy skepticism is wonderful to a point.
Thank you. Yeah, one more question there, please. I'm aware that I have my panelists here trapped, and so we can keep them for as long as we like, but Ardem is online, and we might lose him to a Zoom meeting any second. So it isn't Tuesday, so, God knows what. So just 5 more minutes, Ardem, and then we'll let you go, okay? Please.
Vale. Pues yo os hago la pregunta en español un poco para romper el molde. Y bueno, mi pregunta es en el sentido de cuando, por ejemplo, están con las barreras de poder localizar vuestras ideas o cuando estás en el proceso de cuajar todas estas ideas.
Galvanizing these ideas.
Is the translation coming through these, or is it over the microphone? Because
Cuando están con el proceso
when you are in this process of galvanizing these ideas.
No, I think. Tell you what. Let's do the translation after the question. Make the question short, and then we'll have a short translation.
Well, when you're in the process of galvanizing these ideas.
Try one more time.
¿Cómo superan las dificultades que han tenido para cuajar las ideas? Y, por ejemplo, yo soy una joven estudiante de medicina. ¿Y qué harían si volverían a esa etapa universitaria y tenéis ideas, iniciativa y sacáis cosas adelante? Cuando te enfrentas con la barrera del sistema, de las dificultades económicas, también apoyo, por ejemplo, lo que comentabas del bus y además de eso, pues incentivar las carreras estén en niñas, en mujeres, que hay mucha diferencia. Y bueno.
Okay. Translation, please. Sorry.
So, the question is, if you remember when you were younger and in your salad days when you were at university, what you said about, putting everything on the bus, like Bob Dylan said, or, doing things like being skeptical and that is all fine. But what do you do, for example, in the case of women who are facing difficulties in the area of science, or with so many difficulties that we face? How would you address them individually?
I think I'll come to you, Eva.
Well, unless Hartmut wants to answer to that, but I don't think so. Well, it's a quite interesting question, really. I mean, if I go back, it's funny because I don't think, or I never felt these differences, but it's true that when you start thinking a little bit deeper, when you're getting older, you see that it's important to encourage girls, not only in the STEM, in all sorts of degrees, engineering, for example, that has a huge lack of women. So going back, to be honest, I don't want to go back. I've been working. I'm very happy where I am now. I was working and studying at the same time when I was 18, biochemistry, so I think I did my bit. Of course, we have to teach how. First, we have to believe in our own power. We have a lot. We are no different. We have the same brain, or even better. We have the same chances. Of course, we need policies that allow us not only to develop our career, also to include men in this development. We have to work together with men that they understand as well, partners in general, how important is, again, diversity, that we have to deal with our topics have. But I don't know, if you have another experience as a woman, but to me, I'm not the best one. Although talking to a woman that she was deeper than me in this topic, it's true that we assume things that they shouldn't be assumed by default.
Thank you. Eva, Alea, do you want to give a brief comment?
Just a general comment about education at the schools, at the higher schools. And it's about arts. The training in arts are really useful for thinking in another way and for designing paths for creating knowledge, for obtaining knowledge from the environment. I was remembering a research by a group especially specialized in drawing in the School of Fine Arts, where they have been studying how draws have been used by scientists, by musicians, by people who are creative in their works for accessing to knowledge. And we can remember, for example, the drawings by Ramón y Cajal about neural networks, and this is a way for accessing knowledge. So art in training, art in a school is quite relevant for boosting creativity. And we are not taking enough care about these disciplines at the school, at higher schools, at university.
That's a very interesting point, thank you. Now, as Raimundo said, everybody here is kindly invited to share a glass of wine outside now. So the conversation with our three panelists here can continue, but Ardem, we're going to lose you. So just as a last comment, would you like to comment on this, this question of gender diversity in science?
Obviously, such an important topic, and we didn't cover it, but it's one of the more important aspects of diversity. And I think some people in biomedical sciences, look at this and say, oh, the percentage of women in grad school are almost 50%, so there's no problem. But the reality is so far from this. I was just reading the book about Jennifer Doudna, who of course won the Nobel Chemistry Prize in 2020 for co-inventing the technology CRISPR. And she's a contemporary for us, and growing up in Hawaii in the United States, she talks about how her science teachers discouraged her from a career in science. So this is not that far off. It's not too many years ago. And so I think there's still so much data out there that this is something that is still a problem, and we still need to work on it. again, it could take hours just to discuss this, just to say it's a very important issue.
Thank you very much indeed. Ardem, I'd like to thank you very much for taking time out of your schedule and breaking your rule of kind of sticking to research to be with us. Thank you very much. And thank you to all the panelists. It's been an important and fascinating conversation. And I'd also like to thank very much the audience for being here and being such an important part of all this. So thanks to everyone.
Thank you.